Good morning. Good morning, and can I thank you all for turning out on a typically Monday morning. I've got two dogs, and when I opened the door this morning to let the one of them out, she's a Ridgeback, and she looked outside and she thought, "You wanted a smart dog? Well, you're just about to find out." You go and have a walk if you want, but I'm going to use the ensuite. So first of all, thank you. A couple of things I'd like to mention first. And it says, I wasn't expecting on the previous speaker to have 15, 20 minutes of cosmetic adverts. So I can assure you today that Ian will deliver the speech in the time that we normally expect. So we'll have no problem in terms of timing today. Thank you. The other thing is a big thank you for the response for Christmas lunch. We're now full. That's 90 people. And well, we'll get to 90. We're actually at 87 at the moment, but we'll get to 90. I'll be sending out an email in the next couple of weeks asking if the people that are going to the lunch, the ones that are here, if you'll just let me have your menu choices. And what we've also managed to acquire over the last few months is we've now got a card reader. So what we're going to do is that at the next open meeting, because we have to pay in advance for the Christmas lunch, I'll set a table up outside, and then you can either pay by cheque or card, whichever your preferred choice, or as some of you did last year, just send the cheques to the treasurer or myself, and then we'll sort it out that way. Okay, thank you very much. What I'd like to do now is hand over to David. Yvonne's sunning herself in London, and David's just going to go through the newsletter, just update you with what's going on. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, I've never done this before today. I'm going to be Yvonne. First item, it's quite quick. First item is you may or may not know there are quite a few U3A online learning events, not done by Perth, but nationally. They're mostly on Zoom, usually free, but you do have to book a seat because they're live events by and large. So wide range of talks. The latest one is on artificial intelligence, if you don't have enough of your own, like me, for example. Or information about how to avoid being defrauded online. And there's a link in the newsletter as to how to go there, how to book a seat. We have a magazine, which many of you take, called U3A Matters. It shows how up-to-date I am. I've been calling it Third Age Matters for years and years and years, and it changed. They changed the title without anybody telling me. Pay attention, Dave. So it's a printed magazine which you can, ask me if you want to be ticked to receive it or taken off receiving it. But you can, if you want to go online and find out, there's a version of this magazine online. Now, Yvonne put on here that you might want to drop your subscription to U3A Matters and do the online version. However, I investigated it, and it's really, it's called a screen reader version. So it's primarily intended for people with limited vision. To use a screen reader to read it out. So there's no pictures, it's just text, like a very, very long Microsoft contract agreement. So you might want to stick with the printed version if you've got that, or have a look at the screen reader version, or if you are having vision problems, you might actually prefer that one. Health and safety, item here for group leaders. Just a reminder, because we have updated this, to read our health and safety handbook, as it does assign responsibilities to group leaders, which you may or may not be aware of. If you're a leader of an outdoor event, a walking event, or a running group, you may well be aware of that, but if you're not, it does apply to you as well, even if you live in Unit 7 with your group. Next open meeting, according to the sheet that's going to go out, the newsletter, the next open meeting is going to be on Monday, 28th of September. You need to book your place in the U3A time machine for that one. It is in fact on Monday, 28th of October, and it's 4 weeks from now, and it's entitled My Army Career and Glenarmon College. And the speaker is Mark Mortimer, who's warden of Glenarmon College, and as usual, it'll take place here. St Matthew's Church, with coffees and so on available before the talk commencing at 10:30. Open to all, so please bring friends, guests. They may even want to join us. Speaking of which, as the membership secretary, I'm outside before and after these meetings. If you'd like to renew your membership or join for the first time, come and see me and I shall give you some paperwork in exchange for your 25 quid. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David. Right, today's events. I'm delighted that Ian has come along from the Woodland Trust, talk through some of the activities that they're involved in. I'm sure most of us in the room take advantage of all this wonderful woodland. And it would be good to hear directly from them in terms of what goes on with their organisation. So, Ian, over to you, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and what a fantastic turnout. Can you hear me okay, particularly at the back? And are you okay with the screen? Is the printing clear enough? Because there'll be a little bit of reading, not terribly much. But I would hope that you can all see the screen clearly enough. And well, this is probably the biggest audience that I've spoken to on behalf of the Woodland Trust. You all look very friendly, so I'm kind of looking forward to giving the talk. And it'll last about 45 minutes, and I'll give you a sort of fairly thorough overview of the Woodland Trust and its aims and purposes. I'll also give you a bit of an insight into the local office and what happens round about Perth, which I'm sure you'll be familiar with a number of the sites that we have. And I'll be delighted to take some questions. But also, I'll be asking you some questions as well. And I'll be asking the questions first. And my first question is, how many have heard of the Woodland Trust? Is it... Oh, what a bright bunch. I should have realised, of course, U3A. Any members? A lot of members. Okay, this is fantastic. Very, very encouraging. Well, the members will be probably quite familiar with some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, but I hope there's some interesting bits that you're maybe not so aware of. So, the title of the talk is The Woodland Trust Standing Up for Trees. Which is a bit self-explanatory. The little kind of fancy logo there, if you look at the Woodland Trust logo, that's meant to be the roots of a tree, and the thin bit, like myself, standing up, that's the trunk, and then the writing at the top is a tree. I don't know if anybody kind of spotted the likeness to a tree, but the Woodland Trust is totally dedicated to trees, and in particular, native trees. And through the talk, you'll gather why. There's some fairly big issues that the Woodland Trust is tackling, and this is probably the right moment to explain to you what got me involved in the Woodland Trust. I've been living in Perth for 30 years. I used to be a member of a local organisation that had speakers a bit like yourselves, and in 2013 I attended a talk given in the George Hotel, given by a Woodland Trust volunteer speaker, and I was kind of left the talk quite shocked at some of the things that I was hearing and inspired to get involved. Fortunately, the Woodland Trust has the Scottish office of the Woodland Trust is in Perth, which some of you may well be aware of, along Shore Road. So I got in touch with the Woodland Trust, offered my services as a volunteer, and since 2013 I've been actively engaged in volunteering at lots of different levels, which include going out planting with groups, lots of youth groups and community groups, and for the last few years I've been also giving talks because I've built up a bit of knowledge, or sufficient knowledge of the organisation to feel reasonably confident to stand up and talk about what the Woodland Trust does. So you'll all be familiar with why trees are really, really important. I always like the analogy that if you got a bunch of engineers and scientists together and asked them to produce something that could be good for health and well-being, purify water, clean the air, provide habitats for wildlife, and just be a nice kind of invigorating place to experience, human beings could never come up with something as amazing as a tree or a wood, and they're just utterly fantastic. And The Woodland Trust is targeting particularly native woodland, and I think what my first question I'd like to ask you is, anybody familiar with the definition of native woodland? We have native trees. We've got, on the Woodland Trust website, they refer to 33 native trees in the United Kingdom. I've got a list of 25 because some of them are repeats or kind of variations within a tree type. For instance, silver birch and downy birch. So I've got a list of 25 trees. So the two things that I'm going to ask you to contribute to this talk is, first of all, can somebody give me a wee bit of a kind of definition of what is how are native trees defined? No, I'll just quickly jump in then. At the end of the Ice Age, which was a good few thousand years ago, 8 to 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age, when Great Britain was cut off from the rest of Europe by water, all the trees that were present at that point in time and are still present are classified as native trees. Anything that's come into Great Britain, either over water or brought by discoverers over the last few centuries that have gone importing trees into the country, everything other than this group of native trees are non-native, which doesn't mean that they're bad, but the native trees are specifically the trees that the Woodland Trust is dedicated to encouraging, and I'll explain why. Now, the little quiz, and I do this with every group, there's 25 trees on my list, and I'd like to ask you to just randomly call out names of trees that you think are possibly native. I'll tick the boxes, and the kind of average for this little exercise is about 16. So let's see how you get on. And if you want to fire away, first person to suggest a tree. Pardon? Rowan, yes. Now, I'm not hearing particularly well. The acoustics, it's a bit boomy. And my ears, I've got slightly fuzzy ears at the moment. So, oak, yes. So you'll have to just bear with me. Elm and sycamore I heard there. Hang on again. Elm. Sorry, now. Sycamore. Sycamore came into this country apparently about 800 years ago, and it's considered to be naturalized, but it's not native. It's not been here long enough. It's a bit like me. I've lived in Perth for 30 years, and I'm not a native, but I'd like to think I'm naturalized. So there we go. I'm sorry about that. Any others? Scots pine, yes. Chestnut, no, I'm afraid not. No. Yew, yes. Beech, yes. Beech, aspen, yes. This is coming thick and fast. Your birch, yes. Oh, lovely. Ash and alder. You've got all the A's, by the way, and there's keep going, keep going. No. Alder. We've had an alder. Sorry. Juniper, yes. Willow, yes. Lime, yes. Beech. We've had a beech, I'm afraid. Holly, yes. Sycamore, we've had a sycamore, and I've explained sycamore's naturalized but not native, I'm afraid. Yew, so we've had a yew. Hazel, yes. Hazel. Hawthorn, yes. You're getting good now. Did somebody say white beam? Excellent, well done, that's a cracker. Not many people get white beam. Hornbeam, yes. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to go. We've had willow. Did somebody say birch? We've had birch. Sorry. Hawthorn we've had. Service. No, there's a service tree that is possibly on the list and is English, but this is more kind of, I think service is way down south, and I don't have service on my list. repeatable. I can give you a hat. How's that? John, my speaker's gone. The green light's still on, so I don't know. The lights are on, but nobody's in. Right, we've got... I can hear myself better there. Did somebody say elder? Yes. Who? Sorry. Chestnut, I'm afraid not. No, that's Iberian. It's kind of imported hundreds of years ago, but yeah, afraid so. Crabapple, yes. 1, 2. Blackthorn, have we? Yes. Oh gosh, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 to go. Mulberry, no. I'm not going to go on for 45 minutes. This is not my way. This is not my way of getting out of a talk, by the way. I think spruce, no. There's the next one, there's oh God, Canadian, think of the Canadian flag. There's a clue. Maple, yeah, field maple is native. And then there's, did somebody say wild cherry? Say wild cherry. Wild cherry, yes, wild cherry. And did somebody say Gelder rose? Gelder rose, yes, Gelder rose. And I'm sure somebody said spindle. Yes, you've got 25. Give yourselves a round of applause. Well done. Okay, right. Well, now that we've got that little game over. So these are the trees, and it's not all of these trees that the Woodland Trust goes planting. It's, you know, there's a lot of trees there that the Woodland Trust doesn't actually spend a lot of time planting, but the obvious ones like the birch and rowan and oak and hazel and all of these, you know, standard woodland trees are very much a focus of the Woodland Trust. And the reason for this is, and this is what shocked me, I always imagined Scotland when I was growing up to be a beautiful country covered with woods and absolutely, you know, stunning mountains, but lots of trees. And I was kind of shocked at the talk in 2013 to discover that we're almost devoid of native trees. Now, the figures are quite startling. Were any of you aware of the fact that our tree coverage, that's the area, the landmass that's covered by trees, was so, in the UK is as low as 13%. Yeah, those that are members of the Woodland Trust will probably be aware of this. And we're dramatically less than the European average of 38%. And that stunned me. And I thought, if there's an organisation that's doing something to reverse that process, because Britain used to be covered in trees hundreds of years ago, covered in trees, but we've kind of industry and lots of different reasons, trees have gone, agriculture, clearances, all of that kind of stuff. So we're down to a really low level. Scotland, that's the British average. Scotland's a wee bit better. We're 18% in Scotland. And that's a much nicer picture, isn't it? That picture, to me, that was synonymous to me, that image of Scotland, the dramatic moorland. Now when I see that, when I travel up the A9 and up to Fort William through Glencoe, I look at these hills and I think, God, it's a desert. There's nothing living there, hardly. And you've got one tree, one survivor in the middle of that picture, just kind of slightly down to the left. So isn't that a much nicer image? And if there's an organisation that's trying to sort of improve, get more of that into Scotland, it must be, and Britain, it must be worth getting involved with, and that was my opinion anyway. So Scottish woodland cover is 18%, and not rising dramatically, but being held. And this is a wee bit tricky to read. I don't know if many of you can see this, but the native woodland percent, of the 18%, only 4% is native. The rest is plantation trees, which we need for industry. But if you cut out all the plantation trees, you are down to 4%. And of the 4%, only half is in pretty poor condition. And you might have heard the term ancient woodland. There's only 1% ancient woodland coverage left in Britain. So, you know, we're close to having no ancient woodland. At the turn of the century, turn of last century, it was down to something like 0.5%, and things have improved, but not that dramatically. And the Woodland Trust is one of the main organisations, it's the biggest organisation dedicated to rectifying this situation. And isn't that a nice image? Absolutely lovely. So in Scotland, we're kind of fortunate that we've got some amazing woodland left, which is being looked after by great organisations such as the Woodland Trust. Trees for Life, another fantastic organisation that's focused particularly on the Caledonian pine forests, the remnants of the Caledonia pine forests in the Highlands and over Westish. But in Scotland, we've got, I discovered this when I got involved with the Woodland Trust, we've got rainforest, which I didn't really appreciate. We've got temperate rainforests. Now, my wife's from the west, and having spent a lot of time in the west of Scotland, you know, you kind of, all of you will, if you know the area, Argyllshire in particular, and Dumfries, Galloway, you'll know that it tends to be a bit warmer than here, and it's a bit wetter. But what that's produced is unique woodland habitat, which the Woodland Trust, and that's in amongst this ancient woodland, the 1%, there's ancient rainforests, temperate rainforests in amongst that. The Woodland Trust and other organisations is trying to preserve and expand. So we're kind of really on a bit of a knife edge when it comes to woodland. Another nice image, Bluebell Woods. I'll talk about our Woodland Trust Bluebell Wood, which is quite close to Perth, towards the end of my talk. But with native woodland, one of the things that you've got to be kind of familiar with, I'm sure, is how pleasant it is to get into a native wood compared with in walking around on the edge of, or trying to even get into any of the plantation woods, which are really dark, nothing grows on the ground, and in comparison, native woodland tends to be deciduous trees, a lot more light gets in, so you've got a lot of things happening in the woods at different levels, from ground cover up to the kind of medium size to the large trees. So it's a complete habitat full of living things, as opposed to the other form of woodlands that we need for industry. So Woodland Trust has got a really good focus, got a really good purpose, and what the Woodland Trust is standing up for the trees, back to the original description of the talk, trees are threatened, and they are threatened by climate change, disease, infrastructure development, and intensive agriculture. And again, all of these things, particularly the agriculture and development, we need agriculture, we need development. It's all about managing the process and trying to get a bit of balance into what's happening in the country. So impact-wise, a lot of you will again be familiar with the fact that hedgerows have disappeared over the years, and with them hedgehogs. We don't have nearly as many hedgehogs as we used to. Butterflies, we're dramatically down in butterflies, 55% reduction in the butterfly population over the last 50 to 100 years in the UK, and that's in the main due to the reduction in woodland coverage. And the impact of all of this is that we've got woods that are under threat, and we've got an organisation that's working hard to do something about it. The figure there, 788 ancient woodland sites have been lost or damaged. The Woodland Trust keeps a lot of statistics. And if you go onto the Woodland Trust website and look at their annual reports, and if you go back through the reports, you'll see there's a huge amount of information. So the figures that I'm showing you are really very well-sourced figures. The basis of the figures is extremely well-researched. But in terms of loss of woodland, this is actually a photograph of it's a river in the Snowdonia National Park, and it's in a this river runs through a valley that's a site of special scientific interest that has one of the rarest ancient woods in North Wales. And a number of years ago, there was a proposal to flood the valley to create a dam. So the Woodland Trust fought against this, along with other conservation groups. Unfortunately, won the day, and this beautiful valley is still existing. The water company went a wee bit further away from where they were wanting to be and chose another site, which was far less sensitive. So spent a little bit of money, more than they'd budgeted, but we got a balanced outcome, and for the long-term prospects for everybody that consumes water and everybody and nature, it's a win-win situation. So, and there was a Woodland Trust that were instrumental in securing that victory. But there's been a lot gone, and one of the biggest threats is the lack of protection for trees. And the Woodland Trust is campaigning across the UK with all the sort of UK governments to try and strengthen the planning legislation to create a degree of protection for trees that doesn't exist. And we're making progress. If you think about ancient buildings, so many buildings are listed. They're well protected. However, trees, ancient woodland and veteran trees don't benefit from the same, or haven't benefited from the same protection. But this is now coming in. And one of the things the Woodland Trust has done through the campaigning process is respond to the public sector, say, well, how can we protect something that's not been clearly identified? So the Woodland Trust has been for years now creating a register of ancient woodlands and identifying ancient trees that deserve to be coming under this kind of umbrella of public sector protection from being destroyed by development, which can invariably go elsewhere. So it's quite an important aspect of the Woodland Trust's activities. Also, we've got to deal with disease. Now, ash dieback you'll be familiar with. It's quite a sort of sad sight, looking at a row of trees that were veteran trees that would have been 150, maybe 200 years old, in such a poor condition that they were causing a danger to traffic, so they had to be removed. But it kind of, and you can always cut down a tree and plant a tree in its place, or plant 5 or 10 trees in its place. But you can't plant 200 trees. You have to wait 200 years. So once they're gone, they're gone. And all you can hope for is that what you put back in 200 years' time will have survived. And all of this came about as a result of one individual in Devon in 1972, Kenneth Watkins, who was a retired farmer, agricultural merchant, and rally driver. Did quite an interesting character. Kenneth Watkins lived in Devon, and through his farming life, and at the end of his kind of farming career, he realised that a lot of the woods and a lot of the hedgerows in Devon had disappeared. And he was at a stage where he was able to do something about it. And he did. He identified a bit of land, got together with some friends, raised some money, bought a load of saplings, and planted native trees. And he had the guile, he had the awareness to realize that native trees were the ones to plant. And this little project he had, this wood that he created in Devon, became quite well talked about, and people started contacting him and saying, we'd like to do this in our part of the country. Because I think he would have been covered in the local press, and then that leaked out to wider national media. So he cottoned on to the fact, having a sharp business mind, cottoned on to the fact that there was an opportunity here to develop something, didn't fancy making a commercial enterprise out of it, thought that it was more appropriate to do this as a sort of charitable type of activity, and the Woodland Trust was formed. The Woodland Trust operated out of his farm for a short period, and then it became apparent that Devon was a little bit remote. There was interest from all over the country, so they moved the centre of activity, the centre of kind of control of this organisation, this charity, to Grantham, near Nottingham, and the Woodland Trust has been there ever since. So we now have an amazing organisation, which, if you can read the figures, my eyes are struggling a wee bit here, and I've just changed some of the stats because in preparation for this meeting I had to just check my figures, and every year the Woodland Trust updates their figures, so this has been updated in the last 24 hours. So the Woodland Trust currently owns and cares for 1,200 woods, starting from scratch in 1972. Planted over 68 million trees, which is huge, fantastic contribution, all native. 1,186 woods saved in the last 25 years. Now, the Woodland Trust are absolutely focused on making sure that the data stats that they put out is accurate, and they will be able to tell you every single wood that they've saved or been involved in saving with other organisations through collaboration. And every year, Woodland Trust aims to create 2,000 hectares of native woodland. For those that don't know what a hectare is, it's roughly the size of a rugby pitch. So we're trying to create 2,000 rugby pitches. Instead of being clear pitches, they're woods. And as you can appreciate from the figures that I gave you at the start, they're really needed. The organisation has obviously attracted a lot of interest from general public. Businesses get involved. There's a lot of business support for the Woodland Trust, and postcode lottery as well. The postcode lottery puts huge sums of money into planting trees through the Woodland Trust right across the UK, and a number of other corporate sponsors. Woodland Trust has got over 500,000 helpers, from volunteers like myself to individuals that are associated with businesses that are in direct contact with the Woodland Trust, giving financial support, which is a huge, huge organisation. There's about 3,000 volunteers, and we've got a high proportion in Scotland. We've got around about 400 volunteers in Scotland, doing a whole range of things. There's massive. If you go to the Woodland Trust website, you can see the wide range of things you can do. And if you're not fit enough to go out planting trees, there's stuff that you can be doing for the Woodland Trust, just walking in woods, trying to identify disease and report it back. We've got people, volunteers that have got a bit of a background in the planning process that scour all the planning notices throughout the UK. And if there's any development proposals that look as though they could threaten trees, because if you combine the notice, which identifies a site, with maps and drawings that identify whether there's woodland or there's a history of ancient woodland on the site, you've then got a situation where questions to be asked: should we be objecting to this planning application in the interest of the woods that would be affected? And the volunteers then communicate with people that are employed by the organisation to actually prepare these objections that go into planning applications, or the development of local plans. So there's a lot of stuff. It's not just all planting trees. So there we have the scale of the organisation. Oh, and in terms of income, last annual report, the income figure was just over £68 million from a wide range of sources, through memberships, through donations, through bequests, through grants from the public sector, from private sector organisations, independent trusts. There's a whole host, and lots of businesses. There's a whole host of sources of income that go into the Woodland Trust, which is very, very sustainable because it's consistent. It's not impacted by changes in public policy or austerity within the public sector, because we're not heavily dependent on public funding. It's very much most of the money is generated through kind of private sources. So it's a very, very robust organisation, and that income is growing, and the overheads, can't give you a figure, that's one thing I can't give you at the moment, but the overhead is a well-managed charitable organisation with a very, very low overhead, so vast majority of the money that's contributed towards the organisation goes into the kind of purposes of the organisation, which are basic, quite simply, to the vision. Now, this is really quite difficult to read. The vision of the organisation, or the mission statement, if you like, the old term, is a world where trees and woods thrive for people and nature. And it's all about people and nature. The Woodland Trust is very, very keen to ensure that people get access to the woods and enjoy the woods, benefit from the woods, and get a sense of the importance of the woodland. The activities involve protection. I mentioned a wee bit about the protection side of it, which is looking at for development situations that could threaten woods. We restore woods, and the Woodland Trust obviously creates new woods. On the protection front, here's an interesting little image. This is a wood in Hampshire, which was actually owned by a power company. And the power company, without planning consent, decided that they would stick a substation in the middle of the wood, which nobody would then see. It wouldn't be a blot in the landscape. And in the process, they killed the wood. It's an ancient wood, which is the impact of that substation pretty well destroyed the wood. That was spotted too late. It was only after the substation had been created and private airplanes were going across, folks suddenly thought, oh, what's going on there? And it was reported. It was far too late to do anything about it. But that's the kind of thing that should be stopped and would have been stopped if it had been spotted early enough. On the restoration front, nice little image here which shows on the right-hand side, as you look at it, an image of native woodland, and on the left-hand side, an image of the woodland which is required for industry, plantation. Now, some of you might be familiar with conclaven wood or the bluebell woods that the Woodland Trust have. This is near Balathy, just north of Perth. When you arrive, or when you drive towards, or you're approaching the wood, you see a lot of Douglas fir and Sitka spruce trees, and you think, you know, where's this old wood? And it's inside. That's not an image from conclaven, but that is exactly what it's like. So what the Woodland Trust does in a situation like that is they will progressively remove the plantation trees and either sell them off, or if there's no money in doing so, give them away, or maybe just leave them to rot. But the whole idea of restoration is to convert what's on the left into what's on the right. And it's a big, big job, and it's a long process, as you can gather. The restoration also involves going into the native woodland and removing invasive species like rhododendron and Himalayan balsam. So we get volunteers involved in doing that. If you ever fancy a wee bit of Himalayan balsam picking, and you like to go and visit Moncrief Hill, when they're flowering is the time, and the Woodland Trust would be delighted for any volunteers that wish to offer their services to go and help clear the Himalayan balsam. It's almost an endless task, but it does make an impact and it makes a difference. And likewise, roddy bashing, which is a bit more aggressive. We've been roddy bashing at Conclaven Wood now for about four years, and virtually at the point where all the roddies have been removed. They do start poking up again, but you just you're able then to keep on top of them. But we've had teams of up 25, 30 people at a time going out, chopping up rhododendrons and then eventually, piling them up and getting rid of them. So there's always maintenance to be done in the woods, and the restoration process does involve quite a lot of volunteers, which is tremendous fun as well. And the planting, which is clearly to increase the coverage, to increase the proportion of trees in the native trees in the country, you've got to plant. And we are planting massive 2,000 rugby pitches every year. And we involve a lot of community groups in the planting and give trees. Actually, there's the kind of free trees for community groups and school groups if they can identify some land, and then we help with showing them how to plant the trees and how to look after the trees and all of that sort of stuff. So the woodland creation side is really, really important and very much kind of engaged with the public. And at Conclaven, again, this is the north of Perth, when the Woodland Trust purchased the wood about 6 years ago now. They also purchased land around about the wood, so if over the time since we've bought the site, in the fields at the edge of the woods, we've planted 30,000 trees. So Conclaven Wood is now getting substantially bigger. And remarkably, the daffodils are beginning to migrate into the new woodland. It's lovely to see. They've not been planted, they've just, nature does it. It's quite fantastic. So there we go. That's a wee bit like, it's not Conclaven, but it's a bit like it. So my final message is, there's loads of ways you could get involved if you're interested in getting involved. And I know a lot of you are already involved with the Woodland Trust, and thank you for being so supportive. Anybody else that's interested, the website's probably the place to go. You can come and speak to me after the talk, but if you're wanting to spend a bit of time just looking at what's available, the website, or just get in touch with our local Perth office. We're so lucky here that we've got the Scottish headquarters on the doorstep, and the staff in the Perth office are always delighted to meet people and talk through what they do and see if anybody wants to engage and get involved. So we're a very welcoming organisation. And in terms of visiting local woods, we're quite well off because we've got Moncrief Hill, which is owned by the Woodland Trust, and it's great. There's a great fun. There's a super car park, again, really good access for the public. There's art installations, there's great things for trails for kids to go around. Duncan of Jordanston students help with the art installations, so we're constantly engaged with Duncan of Jordanston and getting new installations onto Moncrief Hill. We've got Conclaven, which obviously the big focus is the daffodils. We have bluebell, sorry, did I say daffodils? Just making sure you're awake. Yeah, bluebells. Port Moak, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Port Moak Moss at Scotland Well near Lochleven. It's a Woodland Trust site. It's a bit different. There are trees there, but it's more about raised peat bogs and restoration of the raised peat bogs, which we're very short of as well in Scotland, although you might not realise it. And Glendevin Wood, again, Woodland Trust, just south of Auchterarder. And finally, if you're from the Dundee side, we've got Backmuir Woods just in the northwest side of Dundee, which has been a long-established Woodland Trust wood. So there's a lot around about. So all I can do is encourage you, if you're wanting to have a walk in a wood, choose a native wood, and if you can choose a Woodland Trust wood, great, because the access is always extremely good. Woodland Trust do spend quite a bit of money, donors' money, but it's important to use that money to create safe, easy access, to encourage people to appreciate the woodland experience. So we're getting very close to the end of my talk, And I've just got some nice images of creatures that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for woods. And if you think back to my second slide of that bare desert, the next slides, none of these creatures could possibly live in these these kind of sparsely planted areas. Not just all creatures. Oh, now John, you said if you press too hard, it'll suddenly jump forward. I'd forgotten about that. So there you go, as we were just a wee. Does anybody know the name of that creature? It's a long-horned beetle. And they live in dead wood. And this is why it's important to leave wood, when trees fall in woods, don't pick them up. As a volunteer on Moncrief Hill, I was taken out for the first time, and the site manager, Jill Aiken, showed me around, and I saw those little trees lying about all over the place. I was saying, Jill, when do these get picked up? When are they removed? And I'm thinking, if it was my garden, I'd be wanting to. He said, we're not gardening. It's a wood. You leave it, it dies, and creatures live off dead wood. And if you remove it, you're going to wipe out the habitat for thousands of creatures, millions of creatures, and it's very, very true. And I mentioned the poor old hedgehog. I, as a youngster, I remember I was brought up in Dundee, and I remember we were quite close to the country, and with lots of hedgehogs. It was always, sadly, dead hedgehogs on the road was quite a common sight, but you don't see them very much now, and it's not nice seeing the dead hedgehogs, but it's always a sign that there's a lot of them around if you're constantly seeing them that unfortunately run over or in your garden. But they're there. We just need more of them, and they need hedges, obviously, to help their survival. And the red squirrel, well, it's another talk from another organisation, really, but we are trying to encourage red squirrels. And if we could get a continuity of woodland, the red squirrel habitat, it used to be that they say a red squirrel in Scotland at one time could, from tree to tree, go from Dumfries to Inverness and back. And it's a very fit red squirrel if it did that. But and the point is that the trees have been wiped out to the point where you get pockets of trees, which is not a very good environment. You get a lot of inbreeding, and it's not healthy. So in terms of biodiversity and just kind of freshening up the gene pool, it's really good to get linked trees, roots that creatures can kind of navigate to find new places to live, etc. And with the Caledonia pine forest, there's lots of pockets of pines, which they're all, at the moment, Woodland Trust and other organisations, including Trees for Life especially, are trying to connect up so that creatures like the red squirrel, for instance, can have a much greater area to live in and thrive. So it's just so that's me finished. I could go on for a lot longer. I think I've probably done enough time. My time is probably up. As I say, you can get involved in lots of different ways through joining the Woodland Trust, just looking at the website, sign up. I've got a leaflet here that if you want to take it away, you can send your details and you can choose if you want to be contacted by the Woodland Trust. No, I'm not selling. I'm not doing the 15-minute sale that you got from the last speaker. This is just, no, you can join. You can spend, I think it's only pitch, £4 a month. That's it, to be a member. And you get a beautiful quarterly magazine. But there's lots of other ways that you can get involved, and volunteering is hugely important. So if you fancy giving some time, that would be greatly appreciated. But there we go. So I've got a few leaflets, which you're welcome to help. Not enough. I didn't bring 100 of each leaflet. So I'm afraid it's first come, first served. But please help yourself, and I'll stop at that point, and if anybody's got any questions about any aspect of what we've been talking about, please feel free to ask. And we've got one question coming.
I shall be your audience.
Oh, roving mic. Right, thank you. And if I can't answer, I'll tell you I can't answer, but I'll come back with the answer as soon as I can. Oh. John, there's another mic here. You want to try that one?
Is that working?
Yeah, there we go. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got a jinx. Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I had heard of the Woodland Trust. I mean, these two words would go together, so I would have heard of it. But I didn't know it was based here. I didn't know much about it. I didn't know how to be involved. I'm really intrigued by some of the things you said, but I'll pick on one, which was we were down to 0.5% of ancient woodland, and we've gone up to 1% is ancient woodland. How, in a space of a short number of years, do you double the amount of ancient woodland?
Yes, good. I was trying to make a point, and you've picked me up very top of the class, brilliant. The 0.5. I should have not focused on the ancient woodland aspect. It was woodland, native woodland, and you're absolutely right. The ancient woodlands, the 1% of ancient woodland coverage is absolutely correct. The 1% would be 0.5 if we were to double the total amount of native woodland. And there's been talk about, we're constantly planting native trees, and the ancient woodland figure will always continue to drop. And what can we do about ancient woodland, I suppose? And it's the restoration bit and the protection bit that's absolutely important, the vital element. So I was quite confusing with that, and I'm sorry, and don't put your hands up to your face, please. That's a good question. And yes, the most important thing is we don't want to lose any more. It's not been very well protected, but now hopefully it's becoming more protected. But the wording of the legislation's still a bit loose, and it's a bit of an ongoing process. But I think the legislators, our politicians, are becoming a bit more aware, and things are moving in the right direction. Yes.
Can I just come? Is it working?
I can hear you, but maybe others can't.
Anyway, I'll talk loud enough.
You've got a good voice. Yeah.
Coming in the ancient woodland. The ancient woodland, as such, is areas which are known to be woodland over. I think they put a figure of 200 years on it.
250 years.
And
yeah.
If it has the history of woodland being woodland.
Yes.
At some time in that and connected to woodland that presently has trees, then it gets designated ancient woodland.
Yes.
And so if you go around a lot of the country, and I'll give you an example, if you drive up the A9 and you're getting close to Burnham and Dunkeld, you'll see a lot of conifers, woodland on both sides of the road. Now, when the work is being done on the road, that's being looked on as ancient woodland and is being treated as ancient woodland because its known history goes back 200 years of the number they put on it. And that's why it seems a bit odd that you can extend your ancient woodland, but you can do it by going into areas which are known to be ancient. Be woodland in the past and extending.
Yes, interesting point. And and it kind of raises, there are other issues with that, because you have through studying maps, and some of you might be aware of the old military maps, the old Roy maps, which go back about 250 years, and woods that were identified in these maps, if they still exist, they're obviously ancient, and in situations where the trees have not survived and other plantations have been planted, if you remove, and the Woodland Trust have a process of removing the plantation trees from land that has been traditionally occupied by trees for hundreds of years, and then there's a period of time that you'd leave the land to see what springs up, because there's seeds in the ground that have maybe waiting to germinate. So there's a lot of activity can go on once the Sitka spruce has been removed, and you start seeing what comes back naturally. And of course you need to enclose these areas. I haven't even mentioned the other threat to trees, which is deer and rabbits, and how we have to work really hard to stop predation of trees. But yes, the site of ancient woodland are kind of quite complex.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's good. I expect challenging questions from the U3A group, and the first two questions have been very, very interesting from that point of view. Yes?
Beech trees are bad because they're not native. Now, you've listed them as native.
Yeah, they're native. There's always
rival...
a bit of debate about beech trees. Beech trees are commonly recognised as being native in the south of England. It's reckoned that they were in existence at the end of the Ice Age, right down on the south coast. But very quickly they migrated to other parts of the UK, and we've got lots of beech trees in Scotland. So some people argue that it's not a Scottish native tree, and I suppose it's not. And I'm in the tricky situation where I'm speaking on behalf of a UK charity that's focused on trees, native trees. So I've got to take a bit of a UK perspective, but at the same time, the beech trees, which are native in the UK, have been in Scotland for hundreds and hundreds of years. So they're not quite like the sycamore as being naturalised. I think they are almost native to Scotland, but they're definitely native to the United Kingdom, if that's a wee help. Yes?
I'm asking about hedgerows. Is there any protection for hedgerows? Because I'm a cyclist, and so I've got time to notice things as I cycle around, and I notice Perthshire is particularly bad for hedgerows being taken out, and the result of that is, apart from the wildlife issue, is soil.
Yeah.
Whereas I cycled in up the Tweed Valley earlier this year, and they've got miles and miles of perfectly, whole hedges, really good condition and really well cared for.
Yeah. Answer to the question is the legislation is focused on ancient woodland, so that excludes hedgerows, but the Woodland Trust engages at very high level with lots of landowners and farmers, and through discussion and encouragement the Woodland Trust tries to persuade and provides grants, and there's some other organisations that provide grants to landowners and farmers to encourage them to plant hedgerows and intersperse them with trees as well as the normal shrubs.
Species such as your hawthorn and your elder and your
just watch your tyres, blackthorn, and,
that is all. These are all native species which in many ways are more bushy rather than tree.
That's right. So we
are in your hedgerows.
Pardon?
Many of those native species on your list of 25 are actually more like bushes, more like hedges than they are.
They can provide the form of a hedge, or if you have an individual plant, it will grow like holly. It will grow into a tree eventually. But we do, as I say, we encourage landowners. There's no legislation at the moment to do that. And I think just making the public aware, and I think, the more it's talked about, the fact that we need to try and recover some of the lost hedges, and the more farmers and landowners feel a wee bit of kind of slight more moral pressure. Again, it's always, when you're running a business, it's about how much it costs. So the Woodland Trust and other organisations will provide financial will provide trees and provide an element towards the cost of the installation and protection of these hedgerows. Yes.
Well, thank you, Ian.
Thanks, John. One more question, yes.
You've mentioned that there's 2,000 hectares of woodland that you're wanting to create per year. I was just wondering how strategic that is, whether you're actually trying to target linking fragmented bits of woodland, or whether it tends to be sort of just sort of like ad hoc, you know, what's around.
Yeah, it is very, very strategic. The Woodland Trust has a well-planned approach to its woodland creation activity, and looks years and years ahead. So, and is trying to, on a kind of landscape scale, create woodland that's all very coherent and interconnected. And it's not a case of if you've got a field to sell and you phone the Woodland Trust and say, look, you can have my field and come and plant trees. If it's a field, you know, if it's not going to help woodland in general, the Woodland Trust will not be interested. If it's a field next to an ancient Woodland Trust will be very interested. Or if it's a large estate, the Woodland Trust will be extremely interested. The Woodland Trust buys up large tracts of land, and always with a plan. And they operate, every wood that's owned by the Woodland Trust is covered by a 5-year plan. So if you go into the Woodland Trust website, all the woods are identified. You can access their 5-year plans to see what their what the intention for that wood is and how it links in with other neighbouring woodlands. So it's a lot of strategic planning goes into the planting or the land acquisition. And the Woodland Trust doesn't just buy sites; they'll plant and manage trees for landowners who don't wish to dispose of the land, but are happy to let the Woodland Trust take over and plant and maintain trees under sort of long-term contracts to improve the environment. So, yeah. Is that helpful? Thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Okay.
I always think when people come along like Ian and tell us about their organisation, how fascinating it is that we've got people like them that are looking after the welfare of not only animals but obviously ourselves, to give us the leisure periods that we get walking through these wonderful places. And when I moved back to Scotland about 3 years ago, and only really stumbled on the wonderful countryside that we've got around Perthshire, and make full use of it. And thank you, Ian, for protecting what we've got, and also some of the information that certainly I didn't know anything about. For example, with the wildlife that feeds on the old wood, and etc. And certainly when you go through the woods now, you'll probably look at them slightly differently than I might have done, say an hour ago.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and please help yourself.
So I'd just like to thank you all again. And as David said, the next speaker is the warden from Glenalmond College. He won't be talking too much about Glenalmond College. What he'll be talking about is his ventures during his time in the army, such as rowing the Atlantic, such as cycling across the Arctic, and things of that nature. So he's a very interesting speaker, and providing that the weather allows us a sensible trip in, then I hope you will enjoy that, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.